Joining us live now is Greens Senator Nick McKim from Tasmania. Nick, thank you for your time.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Now, you heard this morning Malcolm Turnbull telling Kieran that he wouldn't have made that call to the Police Commissioner in New South Wales over Angus Taylor. Do you agree?
I totally agree. It was a grossly inappropriate phone call, not only for the PM to make, but actually for the New South Wales Commissioner to accept. I mean, we know they're old mates, they're old neighbours. They used to put their rubbish out, each other's rubbish out, and ultimately this call is potentially at least a gross abuse of the office of Prime Minister. And I think Australians can legitimately ask the question, was the Prime Minister actually trying to put some pressure on the New South Wales Police Commissioner to go soft on the investigation into Angus Taylor? And to that end, I think the Prime Minister's now got to release a transcript of the phone call so Australians can satisfy themselves that it wasn't an inappropriate call to be made.
But why isn't it appropriate for a Prime Minister to ascertain whether or not there is an investigation, one that warrants his minister to stand aside?
We already knew there was an investigation that had been made public by the New South Wales Police. So the question is, why did Prime Minister Morrison make this call? What was his motives? And as I said, I think it's very open to people to make, at least potentially make an assumption.
But if it's a political referral, like this one is, isn't that seen in a different context?
I don't think so, because ultimately what the job of the New South Wales Police here is to, it doesn't matter who's made the referral, they get a referral, they have to independently assess it and make a decision about whether or not it's appropriate to proceed to a full investigation. Now that happened, they clearly thought there was enough evidence before them to proceed to a full investigation, and for the Prime Minister to stick his oar in the way he did is unprecedented, it's unacceptable, it's a gross abuse of his permission, and he needs to release a transcript about exactly what he said to Commissioner Fuller and clear this mess up.
The thing is, if you look at the mechanics of this, so Labor makes this referral, it is quite politically charged. They put this letter to Parliament, but they have no way to know if that's true. We get to call the media liaison because that's a job. Who should the Prime Minister be able to call to verify that this is true and it's not just a completely politically motivated stunt?
Well, it may be politically motivated by the opposition, but I don't think you can mount an argument that it's politically motivated on behalf of New South Wales Police. Like, they've looked at whatever
No, but
evidence.
how is the Prime Minister supposed to verify it?
Well,
who should he talk to?
We knew there was an inquiry.
But how did you know?
Well, it was made public that it was...
In Parliament by Labor?
That's right.
So how is the Prime Minister supposed to verify that? I wouldn't take that as a journalist.
Not by a personal call. Not by a personal call. I mean, you've got a situation where one of the Prime Minister's ministers is under immense political pressure on the basis of a potential misleading of Parliament, on the basis of a manipulation of figures that we all know he claimed were sourced from the Sydney Council website, which has turned out not to be the case. So these are really serious political questions. Clearly, New South Wales Police believe there's at least a prima facie case that criminal law has been breached here, and the Prime Minister needs to think about how this looks, and it looks terrible, it stinks, and the way for him to clear it up is to release a transcript of the...
You say it's unprecedented, but there are examples of this happening. At the state level, Jackie Trad in Queensland, the Deputy Premier, phoned the Commissioner, the Corruption Commissioner, just hours before being referred as a courtesy, she said at the time. So that's happened on a state level. Federally, Julia Gillard's Chief of Staff in 2011 phoned an investigator about the Craig Thompson matter to ascertain whether that Craig Thompson matter was being investigated. So these calls have been made previously and from the other side of politics.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. I'm not aware of them being made by a Prime Minister in the past, and they may have been made by people, you know, in the Prime Minister's office in the past. But this is the actual Prime Minister of the country ringing up a New South Wales, you know, a state-based police commissioner when we know that there is an investigation underway. And I just think Scott Morrison's got to release the transcript and just clear this up. If all he did was saying, are you doing an investigation, mate, and the New South Wales Police Commissioner said yes, well, that's one thing. But what actually did the PM say? And we know there's significant pressure on the PM. We know there's significant pressure on Angus Taylor. And this has just got to be cleaned up, because as it stands, there's a whiff about this. And I think the Prime Minister's got a responsibility to clear this up.
Isn't there a concern, though, this could become a political tactic here? Because anyone can make a criminal claim.
I've referred matters to the AFP myself. And it's entirely reasonable that that happened, and that it's the job of the AFP or a state-based police force to actually make an independent assessment, firstly about whether the matter's got enough guts to it to proceed to a formal investigation, and then to conduct that investigation.
And you can smear someone a lot in the meantime.
Well, there's plenty of that goes on in this building, and the police need to be independent of that, whether it's the AFP or a state police force. And it just looks bad that the Commissioner has taken a call from a former neighbour and a mate who happens to now be the Prime Minister of the country. And I think Australians have got a right to know, an absolute right to know what was said in that conversation, and I think the Prime Minister's office should release a transcript.
On to some other issues, the Ensuring Integrity Commission, it's in the Senate today. The benchmark for deregistering now the unions and officials has been strengthened quite substantially with work of the crossbench largely, Rex Patrick and One Nation as well. It means now that the demerit system has to be authorised or parallel see a conviction in the court. Isn't that enough in terms of the gravity of offence to see a union deregistered? Because how else do you hold them to account? These union officials remain in place in many cases after breaches of the law.
Well, I'll just make the obvious analogy before I come to the detail of your question, Kieran, but what about the chair of the Westpac Bank? 23 million breaches, enabling pedophilia, enabling potentially terrorism, financial transactions. Chair of the bank still in place.
We'll be going early. The CEO's gone.
CEO's gone, and so he should have, and there should be more to follow. And ultimately, people will legitimately be asking why are unions going to be treated under this legislation more with more regulation and more punitive regulation than the heads of big corporations.
That's actually not true, though, because with the bare accountability regime, APRA can step in if they don't take the right action and force someone to stand down. That power doesn't exist for unions, and so it's not comparable.
Well, ultimately, corporations and unions exist for totally different reasons. Corporations are there to make
but then
a profit.
Why are you using
Well, what I'm saying is I don't believe that unions should be subject to a greater degree of regulation than corporations, and I believe that if this bill passes, they will be subject. And look, the crossbench may have made some changes, and I agree that it does, to a degree, make it more difficult to deregister a union. But ultimately, deregistering a union is a particularly draconian step, and ultimately I think in this country now's not the time to be cracking down on unions, on civil society, on civil disobedience. We need to be taking into account the big corporates that are destroying nature and exploiting workers.
Senator McKim, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.